I am Haley Madsen, 31 years old woman. I'm a commercial interior designer in Charleston, South Carolina, and 6 months ago, I found out my sister stole $620,000 from our inheritance. What I did next wasn't out of revenge, it was about reclaiming what she thought I'd never find the courage to build again. The day I found out, I was standing barefoot on the hardwood floor of my new apartment, still half covered in bubble wrap and painter's tape. My cat Fig was perched on a windowsill, watching the street below as if even she sensed something was about to shift. It was raining outside, that heavy southern spring rain that smells like warm earth and wet brick, the kind that clings to your skin even if you're not outside. My phone buzzed on the counter and I almost didn't check it. I was elbow deep in a box of old sketchbooks, hunting for one particular project I'd sworn I wouldn't lose in the move. But I did check. And that's when I saw it. A notification from Wellspring Trust and Legacy, our family's estate management firm. Subject line, Urgent Account Activity Alert. I opened the email and read the numbers 3 times. Then a fourth. $620,000 transferred from the joint inheritance account. Authorized by Jenna Madsen. My sister. My only sibling. The person who once sat beside me on the cold tile floor of the funeral home while we picked out the urn for our mother. The person who held my hand after Dad's accident. The one who, I thought, had been as broken and bruised by the world as I had. She took it. All of it. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop with shaking hands and logged into the Wellspring portal. Transaction history, wire details, authorization logs. It was all there. The signature was hers. The email verification had been hers. The routing information not to her personal account. No, Jenna had been smarter than that. It went to an entity I didn't recognize. Trainer Freight Holdings, LLC. I Googled it. And my stomach turned cold. The registered CEO. Eric Trainer. Her husband. I slammed the laptop shut and just stood there in the middle of that half-unpacked apartment, surrounded by boxes of things that didn't feel like mine anymore. My knees gave out before I realized I was sinking. The floor caught me in a silent collapse. Fig leapt down and patted over, nudging her head against my arm. I stared at the ceiling. Blank. Silent. Floating in disbelief. The next call I made wasn't to Jenna. It was to Landon. He had been my mom's estate attorney. Smart, kind, wore ties that were always slightly crooked. I hadn't spoken to him since the reading of the will. He picked up after 2 rings. Haley, his voice still held that gentle professionalism, the kind that makes you feel safer than you really are. You all right? No, I whispered. She took it, all of it. Jenna transferred over $600,000 to her husband's company. Silence. Then I'll be at your place in 20 minutes. Don't talk to her, don't touch the accounts, just wait for me. When Landon arrived, he was already on a call. He stepped into my apartment like a man heading into triage, laptop bag slung over one shoulder, umbrella dripping near the door. He sat down on my floor, didn't even wait for an offer, and opened his laptop. This is going to get ugly, he said, but I promise you we're going to fix it. I nodded. But I didn't say anything. Because that was the moment the grief hit. Not for the money, but for the girl I thought my sister still was. That night I didn't sleep. I walked from room to room in that too-big apartment, watching headlights smear across the walls, thinking about every single time Jenna had smiled at me in the last few months. Her texts, her quick visits, her sudden push to help me find a new place after Mom's estate finally settled. I thought she was being helpful. Turns out she was making sure I wouldn't notice. Not until it was too late. The next morning, Landon filed a court motion to freeze Trainer Freight's local assets under suspicion of fraudulent inheritance conversion. He called in a forensic accountant and set up an emergency audit on all our estate disbursement logs. I sat across from him at the conference table of his firm's office, clutching a cup of coffee I couldn't drink, wondering if Jenna was even capable of feeling shame. She's not stupid, Landon said, not unkindly. She just assumed you wouldn't fight her, that you'd be too hurt or too scared. He leaned forward. But I know you and you're not scared. I wanted to believe him. But deep down, something inside me was breaking. Because this wasn't about fraud. It wasn't even about greed. This was betrayal. The kind that changes the temperature of your blood. The kind that makes childhood memories feel like lies. That evening, I drafted an email to Jenna. But I never hit send. Instead, I opened a blank page and typed the words. I will build something from this. Then I stared at the cursor blinking below it like a challenge. And for the first time in days, I whispered aloud to myself. You have no idea what I'm capable of. The first time I saw Jenna again after discovering the theft, it was under fluorescent lights in the county courthouse. She hadn't seen me walk in yet. She stood in a navy blazer, hair straightened to perfection, holding Eric's hand like she was the wronged one. As if I had betrayed her. Her lips moved fast, nervously, whispering things into his ear while he gave her that glazed, disinterested nod I remembered from every Thanksgiving dinner when he didn't want to be there. Landon leaned over to me as we waited near the benches. Stay calm, let her dig her own grave. I didn't respond, I couldn't. My throat had gone tight, my palms clammy. I watched Jenna the way you watch a stranger you used to love, recognizing the shell but not the soul. She finally turned and noticed me. Her face faltered. Just for a second. Then the mask came back on. We didn't speak, not in the hallway, not in the courtroom. The judge reviewed the evidence, questioned Wellspring's security protocols, and authorized a temporary freeze of Trainer Freight Holdings accounts, pending further investigation into whether the funds were rightfully hers to transfer. Jenna didn't look at me once during the hearing. Eric did. Briefly. And there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before, not guilt, not even arrogance. Fear. When court ended, Landon and I stepped into the elevator. As the doors were closing, I heard her heels coming down the hall. Haley. I turned around just as the doors sealed shut between us. But I saw her face. Desperate. Ashamed. I wasn't ready. Not yet. Over the next few weeks, I poured myself into something I hadn't touched in years, design. I started sketching again, not client briefs or paid commissions, but visions, raw ideas of what I wanted to build if I ever had the resources. And the anger strangely gave me momentum. Fuel. That's when Landon made a suggestion. You know Eric's company is hemorrhaging money, right? I blinked. What? The freight business is built on contracts and trust. The second we froze the accounts, he started losing partners left and right. If you were serious about reclaiming what was stolen, there might be another way. I stared at him. You're telling me to buy his company. I'm saying you could, and you'd have every legal right to use your settlement to do it. But I'm a designer, Landon. I don't know anything about freight logistics. He shrugged. You don't need to know how to drive the truck to own the keys. At first I laughed the idea off. But it stuck. Like a burr in the back of my mind. Because maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about owning a company. Maybe it was about proving to myself that I could be more than what they assumed I'd always be, passive, naive, easily written off. Maybe it was about rewriting the rules they had used to box me in my whole life. Landon connected me with a business analyst named Alondra, sharp as glass, but kind, the kind of woman who could spot a bleeding ledger from 10 yards. She combed through Trainer Freight's books and confirmed what he'd said. They're 6 months from collapse, she said over coffee. If someone came in with the capital and a solid restructure plan, they could be solvent again. It's not the worst investment I've ever seen, just needs a different brain behind it. I tapped my pen against my mug. What about a different heart? She smiled. That too. I made the offer 3 days later. It wasn't generous, but it was real. Enough to save the employees' jobs. Enough to keep the fleet running. But nowhere near the number Eric would have expected when he thought he'd be retiring by 40. The offer went through 3 lawyers, a court mediator, and 2 emergency board votes. And then one morning I got the call. It's yours, Landon said. My chest filled with something I hadn't felt in months. Power. But not the kind that crushes. The kind that reclaims. The first time I walked into the company building as owner, every eye turned to me like I didn't belong. And for a second I didn't. I was standing in a sea of cold tile and metal desks, logistics managers and drivers and dispatchers all wondering who the hell I was. Then I introduced myself. Told them exactly what had happened. Told them why I bought the company. And told them what we were going to do next. No one clapped. But no one left. And that was enough. That night I stood on the loading dock in the dark, watching trucks roll in and out under floodlights. My phone buzzed. A text. From Jenna. I didn't know how to fix it, I just wanted us to be okay. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, "You had a choice," and turned my phone off. That week was a blur of adrenaline, meetings, and too many cups of coffee. I walked into Trainer Freight each morning like I'd lived there my whole life, even though most of the staff still whispered my name like it was gossip. But I didn't care. I wasn't there to win a popularity contest. I was there to save something and not just the company. I was there to save myself. One afternoon, I walked into a strategy meeting with Alondra and two new operations leads. They'd been working on restructuring distribution lanes to cut costs and increase efficiency. Eric used to delegate everything to outside consultants. I made a different choice. I wanted to know what I was fixing and who I was fixing it with. I want every manager to spend 1 day a week on the floor, I told them. Warehouse, loading dock, dispatch, wherever they're weakest. We're not fixing this company from behind a desk. Alondra raised her eyebrows, clearly impressed. The others nodded. It was working. But success wasn't enough to silence the storm inside me. At night, when the city quieted and the trucks were finally still, I'd walk through the office alone. I'd trace the hallways Jenna must have walked with Eric, wondering what lies they told here, how many half-truths built the foundation of their rise. Sometimes I'd sit at his old desk, now mine, and stare at the drawer where he once kept a framed photo of them together. I hadn't thrown it away. I'd locked it in the bottom cabinet. Maybe I still wasn't ready to destroy the past. Maybe I just needed to bury it. One night close to midnight, I got a call from Landon. "You're going to want to hear this," he said. Apparently, Jenna had been served a cease and desist from her former firm. They discovered she'd signed my name on several property transfer documents before the trust ever disbursed funds. The forged signature was just the tip of the iceberg. She was under investigation. Again. And this time it wasn't civil. It was criminal. I felt sick. Not victorious. Not vindicated. Just hollow. Because for everything she'd done, for all the damage, deceit, theft, I never wanted her in prison. I wanted her to see what she'd thrown away. I wanted her to understand the cost of the sisterhood she burned. But now the state was involved. It wasn't up to me anymore. 3 days later, I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A real handwritten letter. It was from Jenna. The envelope was sealed with wax, one of those decorative stamps Mom used for holiday cards. My heart thudded as I opened it. Inside, she'd written 3 pages. Shaky handwriting, rambling, full of emotion. But one line stayed with me. "I don't know who I became, Haley. I just know I stopped being someone you could love." I cried for the first time in months. Not out of grief. Not out of rage. But out of mourning for the sister I once had and the life we should have shared. I folded the letter gently and tucked it inside a drawer next to my mother's favorite recipe card. And I whispered, "I did love you, Jenna, I did." Business picked up. Clients returned. I hired a small HR team to help stabilize morale. And one day, while reviewing onboarding documents for a new assistant, I noticed the name of a new client coming in for logistics contracting. Gale and Root Wellness Co. The owner's name. Maya West. My jaw dropped. Maya was one of Jenna's old friends from college. The one she ghosted after borrowing 10 grand and never paying it back. I had a choice. Decline the contract. Or call Maya myself. I called. "Hi, it's Haley Danner, I own Trainer Freight now." Dead silence. Then slowly, "Haley, as in Jenna." "Ex-sister, yeah." We both laughed, awkward but real. I want to offer you something, I said. Full logistics support for your company, 6-month trial, no markup. Maya paused. Why? Because women like you build things and women like Jenna burn them. I want to tip the scale back. That partnership would go on to become our largest account. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I was building legacy. One quiet choice at a time. One healed wound at a time. But then came the day that changed everything again. A knock at my office door. One of my assistants peeked in, her expression confused. There's someone here asking to see you, says she doesn't want anything, just wants to talk. I looked up. Heart pounding. It's your sister. I stood frozen. The hum of the HVAC, the low clatter of keyboard strokes down the hall, it all faded to nothing. She's in the lobby, I asked. My assistant nodded, visibly uncertain. She said she wouldn't stay long, said it wasn't about the money. It never was, not entirely. I rose from my desk, hands trembling slightly. My heart pounded like it had its own voice. When I stepped into the hallway, it felt like walking into a memory. Jenna sat alone on the green couch by the front window. She looked smaller, worn down in a way expensive makeup couldn't hide. Her posture, normally so upright, so self-assured, curled inward like she was trying to disappear into herself. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second she was 16 again, begging me not to tell Mom she crashed the car. She stood slowly. Hi. My throat tightened. Hi. We sat across from each other in my office. She stared at the bookshelf behind me, not meeting my eyes. I shouldn't have come, she said softly. I heard about what you did with the company, with the women's program, with Maya. I raised an eyebrow. You're keeping tabs. She gave a weak smile. Not really, word gets around. There was a long pause. I got the letter, I finally said. Her lips parted. I didn't think you'd even read it. I read it 3 times. She blinked hard, trying to keep from crying. You lied to me, I said, voice trembling. You stole from me. You burned down everything Mom and Dad built and still walked like you were the one wronged. I know. I leaned forward. Do you really? She shook her head. No, I don't think I do. I thought I did, but it's like I'm only now waking up. I swallowed. Silence filled the room like fog. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small. It was the locket. The one our mom used to wear, tiny gold, etched with our initials. I kept this, she said, setting it gently on my desk. I didn't pawn it. I wanted to, I don't know, believe I was still part of something. I stared at it, so delicate, so familiar. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. I'm not here to fix anything, she continued. I'm here because you became the woman I never had the courage to become, and I needed you to hear that from me. Her voice cracked. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I wouldn't even recognize it if you gave it. She stood, needed you to know I see it now, what I lost. She turned to leave. But something inside me shifted. Jenna, I said, and she paused at the door. I picked up the locket, weighing its gold warmth in my palm. I don't know if we'll ever be sisters again, but you were part of my story, and you still are. She nodded, her lips trembling. Thank you. She left quietly. I sat alone for a long time afterward, staring at that locket, feeling everything. Regret, pain, nostalgia, some strange, slow-moving version of peace. I didn't know what came next between us. Maybe nothing. But for the first time, it wasn't hate that filled the space between her name and mine. It was breath, room, possibility. 2 months later, I stood at the grand opening of the Nest's new training center. Local press came, alumni women gave speeches, we even got a small segment on the evening news. Landon was there, standing beside me with his ever-steady presence. After the crowd thinned, he turned to me and asked, "So what now?" I laughed softly. Now I teach, I lead, I maybe learn how to rest too. He tilted his head. You know, I could use a partner on a few new estate law cases. I smirked. You just want my office snacks. The truth. I was rebuilding not just what Jenna stole, but what I'd forgotten I could be. I was never meant to live in her shadow. I was meant to grow something that outlived both of us. And now finally I was. But then came the call that made me freeze in place again. Not from Jenna. Not from a lawyer. From a private investigator. One I never hired. I believe there's something you need to know, the voice said. It's about your sister's husband and the $620,000. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. What do you mean about her husband? I asked. The man's voice was calm but firm. We've uncovered evidence that Eric rerouted a large portion of the $620,000 through shell entities before Jenna ever touched it. Your sister may not have been the only thief. I felt the world tilt. The very foundation I'd rebuilt myself on suddenly wobbled. But Jenna forged my name, I murmured. She signed off on property transfers, lied about the trust, everything. Yes, the pie said, but it looks like she may have been manipulated too. I think Eric orchestrated the whole thing and used her as cover. My hand shook as I ended the call. Eric. Of course it was him. The puppet master, the slick charmer, the man who played the victim while steering the storm. He'd made her the face of the betrayal, while he sat behind the curtain pulling every string. I spent that night wide awake, sitting in the dark with a bottle of ginger ale I couldn't bring myself to finish. All this time, I'd hated Jenna for what she'd done. And she had done it. But what if she wasn't alone? What if the man I thought I'd outmaneuvered was still pulling levers behind my back? I opened my laptop and pulled up Trainer Freight's financials. The shell company names the pie mentioned. One of them had been a subcontractor for us, approved by Eric 3 years before. It was still active. Still paid. Still hidden deep in vendor lists. I sat back stunned. He hadn't just stolen from my family. He was stealing from me right now. The man whose company I now owned had left behind a shadow network still draining it. The next morning, I walked into Landon's office without knocking. He looked up from a file, startled. Everything okay? No, I said, we're reopening everything. Everything. Every contract Eric ever signed, every vendor, every asset transfer. I want a forensic audit so deep it makes him feel it from wherever he's hiding. Landon blinked, then smiled. There she is. The audit took 3 weeks. We found 5 more shell companies, 2 registered under fake names, 1, and I'll never forget this, registered under my mother's maiden name. I nearly threw my laptop. It was cruel. Surgical. Eric had planted corruption inside every corner of the company, like a rot that kept feeding even after he was gone. By the time we froze the payments and filed the fraud claims, the number wasn't $620,000 anymore. It was $1.4 million. I called Jenna. I didn't know why, instinct maybe, or the sliver of sisterhood I still hadn't completely severed. She answered after 3 rings. Haley, her voice cracked, I didn't expect to hear from you. I found something, I said. Then I told her everything. About Eric. The fraud. The shell companies. How he used her to keep his hands clean. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Then came the smallest whisper, I didn't know. I believe you, I said. And I meant it. That week she filed a formal complaint against him, shared everything she had. Emails, texts, handwritten notes, we submitted it all to the fraud unit. Suddenly the case against her took a hard pivot. And the spotlight turned on Eric. He tried to run. Of course he did. But he didn't get far. They caught him trying to board a flight to Dubai under an alias. The mugshot that hit the news. Poetic justice. The confident smile was gone, replaced with exhaustion and rage. It felt like the past was finally cracking open and bleeding out. I didn't celebrate. Not really. But that night I sat with Jenna at a small cafe, 2 hours before her own court date would be dismissed in full. We shared tea. Not peace. But tea. Why'd you call me? She asked softly. Because I know what it's like to be manipulated by someone you trust, I said. Her eyes filled. He ruined both of us. I shook my head. No, we let him, but we don't have to keep letting him. That was the last time we saw each other for a while. But this time there were no slammed doors. No final screams. Just space. And maybe that was enough. Weeks passed. Business stabilized. The nest expanded into a second warehouse space for training. And I breathed. For the first time in years, I breathed without anger in my throat. But then one morning, Landon entered my office with a strange look. He handed me a file. "What's this?" I asked. "A property deed." My eyebrows lifted. He nodded slowly. "Eric's vacation home in Tahoe, turns out, he put it in your name." The deed sat heavy in my hands. Not just metaphorically, the envelope itself was thick, crinkled at the corners with a weight that felt both literal and emotional. Eric's name was nowhere on the page. Instead, clear as day, mine was etched across the top in bold. Property title: Lake Tahoe Residence. Owner: Haley Cartwright. "What is this?" I asked again, my voice low. Landon leaned on the doorframe, hands in his pockets, like he was waiting for me to connect dots I didn't want to see. "He transferred it quietly months ago," he said. "Probably thought it'd keep you quiet, or maybe it was part of a backup plan. Either way, the house is yours." I set the paper down carefully, like it might explode. It didn't make sense. Why would he sign over $1 million vacation property to me, the woman who'd exposed him, ruined him, had him arrested? Guilt, I asked aloud, but even I didn't believe it. Eric didn't feel guilt, he felt leverage. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced. Poured wine, didn't drink it. Stared out the window as headlights passed like thoughts I couldn't hold. Every part of me screamed to walk away, sell the place, burn it to the ground, donate it something. But there was a whisper inside me, one I hadn't heard in a while. The whisper of curiosity and power. If Eric wanted me to have it, why? What was inside? 2 days later, I flew to Tahoe. The house was secluded up a long gravel driveway framed by redwoods. Winter hadn't left yet. Snow crunched under my boots. My breath fogged the air. I unlocked the door. It swung open with a slow, echoing creak. Inside smelled like cedar, old cologne, and something else, faint, musky, like long-closed boxes and secrets not meant to breathe. The living room was pristine, granite fireplace, leather armchairs, a bottle of bourbon half-drunk on the table. I walked through like a ghost. Everything was curated, cold, sterile, like a showroom, not a home. Then I found the study. That's where the warmth disappeared entirely. The room was dim, wood-paneled, filled with file cabinets, a desk bolted to the floor, and a digital safe hidden behind a painting of a stormy harbor. Classic Eric. And classic Eric was lazy. The safe code was the date of his company's founding, the same number I used to disable his last set of offshore accounts. It opened on the first try. Inside, hard drives, USBs, a burner phone, a blue velvet pouch, and one thin manila envelope labeled JC Leverage/Confidential. My heart dropped. I sat on the leather couch, envelope in hand, breath shallow. JC. Jennifer Cartwright. My sister. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside were glossy surveillance photos. Not recent, years old. Jen entering an upscale hotel hand in hand with someone who was not Eric. Dates and timestamps were scribbled in the margins. There were receipts too, wire transfers, luxury jewelry purchases billed to shell accounts, airfare under aliases. And at the bottom, a printed transcript. Eric, if she ever crosses me, I release it. I want her scared enough to stay loyal. Unknown, and what if she finds out you forged the will? Eric, then she's the one who'll go down. I have everything. I nearly dropped the papers. My mouth went dry. Jen didn't just help Eric. She was complicit in keeping secrets I hadn't known existed. But the betrayal, the extent of it, wasn't even the worst part. The worst part? He was going to blackmail her too. By nightfall, I had copied every document onto my own encrypted drive. And I sat on the floor of that luxury prison, sobbing. Not for Eric. Not even for Jen. But for myself, the version of me who'd once believed in redemption, in reconciliation, in forgiveness. That Haley, she died that night in Lake Tahoe. I slept on the couch, wrapped in a throw blanket, while snow pelted the windows like applause for a storm that never stopped. Back home, I made my move. I didn't release anything, not yet. Instead, I sent Jen one photo, just one. A picture of the envelope marked JC with no message. Her response came in under 3 minutes. Jen, where did you get that? You need to give it to me, please, I'm begging you, that's not what it looks like. Me, then what is it, Jen? Jen, he was going to ruin me. I did what I had to. You have no idea what he was capable of. But I did. I knew what Eric was capable of. And now I knew what she was too. 2 weeks passed. I didn't respond. Jen texted, called, emailed, even sent a certified letter begging me to meet. I ignored her. And then one crisp morning, I got a ping on my business account. A wire transfer from Jennifer Cartwright, $620,000 even. No note, no explanation. Just the money. The same amount she stole from our inheritance. I stared at the screen for a long time. And I didn't feel vindicated, or victorious, or even satisfied. I just felt empty. Like I'd won a war where the battlefield was my own family. A week later, I put the Lake Tahoe property up for sale. It sold fast, cash buyer. I donated half to a women's financial literacy nonprofit, used the rest to expand my firm's private investigations division. But one thing I didn't do. I didn't erase the files on Jen. I kept them, not out of malice, but as a reminder. A reminder that love, when tangled with betrayal, can rot at the roots, no matter how beautiful it looks above ground. The last time I saw Jen, she was walking into a bank. I stayed across the street, behind tinted windows, watching. She looked older, worn, alone. But she had her freedom. Because I chose not to end her completely. I didn't need to. She knew I could. In that was enough. I didn't open the text right away. It had arrived at 4:23 a.m., a time when nothing good ever happens. The screen lit up again, another message, then another. I finally gave in. Jen, we need to talk. Jen, please, it's important. Jen, I know you kept the files, I just want to explain. I stared at the phone, jaw clenched so tight it ached. This wasn't about regret. It was about fear. She knew what I had, and that I hadn't used it, and that knowledge haunted her. Good. 3 days later, Landon and I sat across from a business broker at a sleek cafe in downtown Denver. Steam rose from my untouched coffee as I slid a folder across the table. Inside, a proposal, clean, brutal, surgical. It was the official offer to acquire full ownership of Cartwright Westwood Financials. Eric's former company. My sister's primary investment. And soon mine. The broker blinked, surprised. Ms. Cartwright, this is a hostile acquisition. I nodded, only if they fight it. Landon smiled, slow and precise, and they won't. Because Eric was gone. And Jen, she had already paid me once. She'd pay again whether she knew it or not. The company wasn't massive, but it was influential, a boutique financial firm with legacy clients and discreet power. I didn't want it for the money. I wanted it for the control. The same control they had once lorded over me. Now it would be mine. Landon coordinated the silent buyouts. We contacted minority shareholders, offered generous premiums, and waited. Within a month, we'd secured 53% ownership. Just like that, the tides shifted. Jen still held 12%, but her voice no longer mattered. And when she found out, she showed up to my office. Uninvited. She stood in the doorway like a ghost from a past I hadn't summoned. Blonde hair pulled into a tight twist, power heels, a white coat that looked stiff with tension. My receptionist looked at me unsure. I nodded, let her in. Jen stepped in, closing the door behind her like she needed the click to feel real. You bought the company, she said, voice low. Eric's company. Our company now, I corrected, standing slowly. Would you like to sit? She didn't. I came to say, she paused, I know you did this to hurt me. I met her gaze, cold. No, I did this to finish what you started. Her face cracked then, just a little, enough to show the fear underneath. You've made your point, she whispered. You've humiliated me, you took the money, the company, what more do you want? It wasn't rage in her voice. It was exhaustion. And something else I hadn't heard from her in years. Defeat. I leaned against the desk. I didn't do this to humiliate you, Jen. I did it to protect myself from you, from him, from whatever damage you two planned behind my back. She blinked fast, her jaw trembling. I lost everything too, Haley. I laughed sharp and sudden. No, Jen, you gave everything away, when you chose him, when you forged my name, when you lied. Silence. Then a whisper, I'm sorry. I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel it. The weight of years of choices, of betrayal. But I didn't respond. I just watched her, my sister, the girl who once shared secrets under starry backyard skis, crumble in front of me. She stepped back like the air in the room pushed her out. I never meant for it to go this far, she whispered. It always goes too far, I said quietly. That's what happens when you believe no one's watching. She opened her mouth, then shut it. There was nothing left to say. She left without another word. That night I sat alone in my office. The city buzzed outside, neon lights flickering like false hope. And for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected. Not rage. Not revenge. Just peace. It was subtle, fragile. But it was mine. Because I had survived every lie. Every theft. Every betrayal. And I hadn't just endured, I had risen. On my own terms. The firm's logo changed 2 weeks later. Cartwright Westwood Financials became Halberg Strategic Holdings. A quiet final exhale. One chapter closed. A new one just beginning. The first time I walked into the boardroom as CEO, I didn't wear power colors. No red, no navy, no shoulder pads or sharp heels. Just a soft cream blouse, hair down, a simple chain around my neck that used to belong to my mother. I didn't need to prove anything. I had already won. The room quieted as I entered. Familiar faces glanced up, some respectful, some hesitant, none defiant. They knew. In that silence, it was the sound of authority. The agenda was simple. Introduce the leadership change, finalize internal restructuring, and install Landon as managing director of operations. Jen's name was nowhere on the paperwork. She hadn't shown up since that final conversation in my office. But she had sent over her 12% shares last week. Signed. Surrendered. I never asked why. That night I drove alone to a small cabin just outside Estes Park. Snow was falling lightly, the kind that doesn't stick, just whispers across the windshield like a memory you can't quite touch. I built a fire, poured a glass of wine, and opened a box I hadn't looked at in years. Inside, a photo. Me and Jen, ages 9 and 7. Our father stood behind us, hands on our shoulders. We were wearing matching flannel pajamas, missing teeth and smiling so white it hurt to look at now. I let the photo rest on my lap. Then I let myself cry. It wasn't rage anymore. Not even sadness. Just grief for the version of us that never got to grow up whole. For the girls who once believed family meant safety. For the years we'd never get back. I stayed at the cabin through the weekend. No phone, no meetings. Just firewood, snow, and silence. By Sunday morning, I felt something uncoil inside me, a slow unwinding of tension I hadn't even known I was holding. I had reclaimed more than money or property. I had reclaimed myself. My name. My dignity. My peace. Weeks later, I received a handwritten letter from Jen. It wasn't long. Just 6 sentences. No excuses. No demands. Only, I'm in therapy, I know I need to change, I'm sorry for what I did, I understand if you never respond, but I hope one day we can find a version of us that's honest again. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I folded the letter gently, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it into the same box where the photo lived. It wasn't forgiveness. But maybe it was a beginning. Because the real inheritance wasn't money. It was the legacy of resilience. Of learning how to build from nothing and still choose integrity. And that would always belong to me.